I really deeply wish that we could have some sort of tasting in video games because I think that would be cool.
That would be wicked cool.
But and smells too. Oh man, I wish we could do smell.
I am joined today by Danny Weinbaum of Eastshade Studio, and we are going to be talking about Leaving Lyndow and Eastshade. So thank you for agreeing to talk to us a little bit about these two games, Danny.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. So to begin, why don't you give us a snippet on Leaving Lyndow? What is it, and what kind of direction is that game going?
So, Leaving Lindau is like a short kind of coming-of-age story where you play as someone about to leave home for a very long time, possibly forever if things don't go so well on the trip. And you're living out your final day before you leave. And the game plays as a sequence of environments where you can explore at your own pace. So there's nothing's going to, kill you or anything.
Right.
And before progressing, so you can kind of, spend as much time on each environment as you want before progressing to the next area. And you can look at objects similar to Gone Home for people who've played that game. But something distinct from a lot of games in this sort of genre, which is a fairly small genre at the time. But something distinct is that there's people in this game. So you can talk to NPCs. And there's a few important conversations you have during the course of the game. And then there's also a few mini games that will hopefully make you feel like you're more a part of the world.
Cool. And I think I want to start by talking about this world and what you're doing with Leaving Lyndow and the larger world of Eastshade. So people that don't know, you've been working on Eastshade, which is a much larger game, for a long time. And Leaving Lyndow is set in that world, but is a standalone game in its own right.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I think this is a really cool way that a couple other developers have addressed the idea of demos or explorations of the world. And you've put out a video that does a pretty good job of explaining your thought process, but I thought it'd be great to hear that in your own words here as well. So what is it that you hope to do with Leaving Lyndow in the greater picture of Eastshade's development?
Yeah, so in terms of the reasons we're doing this small game, it relates to what you said about demos, developers putting out demos. So there's kind of two groups of reasons. The first are like the business reasons, and that just comes down to, and it's not so much about money. I mean, it'll be nice to get some supplemental funds, but mostly for us, it's that we're scared to ship a really big game because we've never shipped a game before, and for people who don't know about the process of shipping a game, there's a lot that can go wrong. Like you can choose the wrong day, or you can day of other news or something. You can mess up your press releases. You can not get in touch with the right people, or on the technical side, you can have just horrible bugs which you weren't able to predict because you didn't have like a really wide range of hardware that could be really crippling. And that was just a scary prospect for us because we're pouring so much into Eastshade, and I'm personally spending my entire life savings on it. So I didn't want anything like that to happen. So I really wanted to do something small first, and that's where the idea for Leaving Lyndow came into play. And then the second kind of group of reasons are like the artistic reasons. It's not like exclusively just a game that will, it's not like exclusively practice for shipping Eastshade necessarily. It's also, we thought it was a cool game to do as well, since we are trying to build this kind of place. We thought it'd be cool to have this small primer first. And mechanically, they're kind of opposites of each other. I mean, they're similar in that they're both first person and they have the same controls and everything. But mechanically, Eastshade is totally free-roaming, open world, kind of like an Elder Scrolls game. And there's no central overarching story. So there's like a bunch of little stories but there's no, where it's not like, Eastshade is not like a story we're trying to tell. It's just like a world. But Leaving Lindau is a small encapsulated story we're trying to tell. So it's kind of, it's just a much smaller, more focused, encapsulated story. And that was fun for us also to take a break and do something more authored, I guess I could say.
Cool, yeah. I wanted to also kind of pick your brain on whether or not this was already a part of the Eastshade world, this story, or if it's something you created for Leaving Lindau, or is it something that was already kind of there and you expanded on?
Yeah, it's totally new. Like the story is new, and actually most of the assets are new too. Like all the art and stuff, areas that wouldn't originally have been in Eastshade, and it also takes place like a while. It's like a prequel in terms of time-wise. So it actually, Lindau, which is the city that you're leaving out of in Leaving Lindau, is also in Eastshade, but it's like 80 years later. And when you're leaving out of Lindau, it's actually just being built. So everything's all like under construction and everything. So it's like a totally different, the city's in a totally different state than you'll see it in Eastshade.
Cool, very cool. I think it's a really interesting way to attack some of those hurdles that you brought up and build upon this world that you guys are creating. So
Cool.
I applaud the idea.
I'm glad you think so.
Moving from Leaving Lindau to Eastshade, I want to talk about the mechanical difference, because it's one of the things that first really attracted me to Eastshade. But to begin, why don't you kind of give us the convention pitch or the summary for what Eastshade is, for those that haven't heard?
Yeah, so Eastshade, our main goal with Eastshade was to, as I kind of already mentioned, build like a world, a place that you can go. I've described it to people as a travel simulator before. It's like, why do you go to like a new place? It's usually not, well, I mean, obviously it's not to save that place, like to save
Right.
the world or whatever, which is fine. I mean, that's a cool story mechanic. But in our case, it's like, what in real life, why do you go to a real place? Well, you go to like meet the people, to see the architecture, to, feel what it's like to be there, to taste the food and stuff like that. I really deeply wish that we could have some sort of tasting in video games, because I think that would be cool.
That would be wicked cool.
But and smells too. Oh man, I wish we could do smell. But yeah, so that's what we wanted to do. That was like our big goal. We just want to make a really cool place. It's kind of like an Elder Scrolls game. Like the cool part of an Elder Scrolls game is really the world. I mean, very few people are like, oh yeah, I play Elder Scrolls games because I just love the combat system or whatever. I mean, it's okay, but it's not like exactly the best at that. It's best at being a world, and that's why people do it. So if you picture Elder Scrolls, take out the combat and replace those game loops with, I guess, different game loops in our case, that's really what we're trying to do. And I guess I should mention mechanically what the game loops are. So you can talk to people, kind of like in Elder Scrolls, and your dialogue choices will impact the world. So that's the other thing we're trying to do, to make it an interesting place to explore. The player needs to have some agency, and the world needs to give them feedback on their actions. So you can talk to people, make dialogue choices, and that will change their schedules in some cases. It will change the kind of information they give you. And in some cases, it will change like who they're friends with in the world. So that's cool to see. And then, of course, the big part, the kind of iconic mechanic, is the painting thing. And that is our way. I mean, most of the quests in the world, so there are quests, kind of like in Elder Scrolls, but it's not quests where you have to go kill things. It's quests where you usually have to, not coincidentally, go paint something. Very conveniently, many people in Eastshade need a painting, kind of like many people in Elder Scrolls, for some reason, need someone to die, or a lot of people to die, which is, kind of everyone's problem in that world.
Right.
So, the paintings you need to do for people, they're not always clear. Like, they don't tell you, go to this one place and make this one painting. Sometimes people will just drop hints about like the kinds of things they like, and that's a kind of a riddle puzzle aspect of the game, where if you pay attention to the world, the things you see, and you pay attention to the things people are saying, then you can sometimes pick up on like, oh, that person I bet would like a picture of, this owl or whatever.
Cool.
And you can offer them a painting, and then as a reward, the NPCs will always give you something that will help you explore, like expose you to more parts of the world to go do more cool things.
Cool. Yeah, that was that mechanic of painting was so unique when I first heard about Eastshade. I was really drawn in by that. It's not something I'd ever seen any kind of game tackle before. I wondered if you could talk about where that came from. Is that like a personal interest of yours? Are you a painter, and are you translating it into a game world, or
yeah,
does it come from somewhere else?
That's a good question. Something I should mention about the painting, because it's come up before with the kind of feedback from people, is a lot of people hear like painting and they think of, well, people know what painting is, and they're like, oh, well, and they'll see the game, like how the painting mechanic works, and they'll be like, oh, that's not like painting at all. It's like a screenshot, and it is like a screenshot.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be dishonest about that, but that's not. I mean, I'm not trying to make Photoshop, That's not,
right. It's more like framing a particular painting
exactly.
and then taking it from there. Yeah.
It's more like photography than like oil painting, say. And in the same way in Elder Scrolls, like, the combat is kind of a simulation of what actual combat is like.
Yeah.
I guess that could be similar. And then in terms of where the idea came from, so I'm a professional environment artist. That's what I've done for my career. And before I went indie, that's what I was doing for AAA games. So that's really my strong suit. And certainly the one of the most important parts about Eastshade is how beautiful it looks. So we were trying to, and when I say me, I'm talking, my girlfriend helps me a lot with the design. So we talk about these things. And we were trying to come up with a way to capitalize on the environments mechanically instead of just like a pretty place where you do whatever it is you're doing. We wanted the environments to actually be like part of the mechanics, and it's kind of a hard thing. Like how would you start doing that? And she came up with, well, what if you play as a painter? And
Cool idea.
You have to pay attention to the environment in order to excel at the game mechanically as well.
Right.
So that seemed like a perfect fit.
Yeah. That leads very nicely into a discussion of how you became indie. So you kind of touched on your background in environmental design, but what brought about the decision to move to independent game development?
Well, I like many people in games, I wanted to make my own game, and I've been wanting to make my own game for a long time. And when the initial idea for Eastshade came to me, which looked very different than it does right now, but my desire to make the game was so strong that I was like staying up till 4 a.m. every night, like working on it, and then going and doing the day job, and it was just killing me, obviously, because it's quite irresponsible to do that. And I thought, oh, and I should mention too, I mean, one curious part, because I ended up quitting my job, and I've been working on this for 3 years, is like, how do you have money to do that? And the answer to that is just I've always been saving quite religiously because I always wanted to make my own game, and I always thought it would cost a lot of money.
Right.
So I've just been, it's like been one of my goals in life, save. And when the idea for Eastshade came to me, and I saw these other people at the time making, games all by their lonesomes, and I was thinking, well, like, wow, they're making these cool big games. Maybe I don't need as much money as I thought. That I did previously, and I had enough money to go for a while. So I just decided to quit, and I figured, well, if I fail completely, then at worst I'll just have no money, and I'll have to go back and get a job like a normal person again. So that was how I went indie.
Interesting. The other thing we like to ask indie developers is about their influences. So what other games, either recent or more nostalgic to your childhood, would you consider an influence on the way you design?
Well, I think that Elder Scrolls is probably the big one for me, unsurprisingly. Yeah, that's always it's specifically that series of games that every time I play, I just want to make games so bad when I play it, and they make me feel good. Like some games I like to play and I get addicted to them, but they don't really make me feel good. Like I was addicted to Battlefield 3 for a while, and my brain always just felt like mashed potatoes when I was done playing, and I was angry. And when I play an Elder Scrolls game, I feel happy, like I just I don't know, experience something, like I went somewhere. Kind of like travel. It makes me feel kind of similar. It's really weird, and it inspires me the same way. Like I get that same feeling when I travel. I get really inspired, like to create, and yeah, it's. I would say those games are so huge that that's the only ones I'll mention.
That makes sense. To kind of bring this to a close, we like to ask developers about other indie games that they may be aware of, that they think are doing something really innovative or something cool that people might not have heard of. So do you have some indie games on your radar currently that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'll mention one that I'm so passionate about that I have to devote all my time to it, and that's Ghost of a Tale, which I think you probably have heard of.
I have.
And it's in early access, so it has it's a different kind of early access. It's more of a vertical slice early access rather than like here's the whole game but unpolished, which to me is a better way to do early access, especially for that kind of game, just because, you know, instead of getting a huge serving of everything that's super unpolished, you get a small serving of something that, you know, is really quite polished. But when I played that game, and I wanted to wait until it was out, but I couldn't resist. So when I played that,
I went through the exact same thought process.
oh really?
I was gonna hold off, and I couldn't resist it. I had to get my fingers in there.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, so that game gave me the same like enchanting feeling that Elder Scrolls gives me in like the world, and it's also really it was a cool game for me because it's kind of similar to what I'm trying to do with Eastshade in that the core loop of the game is exploration itself. Like there's the sneaking mechanic, but that's and you know this is of course my own opinion on the matter. I mean, obviously other people might feel differently about it, but to me the sneaking mechanic seems auxiliary to the main mechanic, which is just exploring the game exposes you to more parts of the game. So you'll find things that will open up more parts of the game for you, and that core loop I think is the compelling part of the game. Like that's really what's exciting you about moving forward. It's not really like, oh, this, you know, sneaking is the best sneaking ever and it's so fun. I mean, the sneaking is fine, but the exciting part is the exposing of the world itself, and that's what I want the exciting part for Eastshade to be as well, and to a certain extent Leaving Lyndow.
Awesome. Well, Danny Weinbaum, thank you so much for sharing some information about both Leaving Lyndow and Eastshade with us.
Oh my goodness,
and
thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, of course. And Leaving Lyndow will be available on February 8th, and people can find a link to the Steam Greenlight in the comment section below.
Cool. All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.